Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I'm your host, Harry Fling, and yes, it's that time again of the year where we do another rewrite, and this time for another member of the Big Four. What could that be? Summerslam, in particular, 1994. At the time, it was held at the brand new United Center in Chicago, home of the NBA Chicago Bulls, number 23, Michael Jordan. Of course, I'm a Knicks fan, so it's hard for me to get excited about another team, so I hesitated there for a minute. But that's neither here nor there. This was not a bad SummerSlam. I've seen worse, but certainly wasn't the best, save for one match, which is the steel cage match for the WWF title, Brett and Owen, which that one I'm going to keep the same because I loved everything about that match. I gave it 5 stars having watched this event recently rewatching it on Netflix. And I give it 5 stars then, and I give it 5 stars now. Dave Meltzer, of course, gave it 5 stars, which was rare for WWF to get that honor at the time. And the chemistry with the two brothers and the sibling rivalry reaching its apex, and the family just jumping into the cage after all was said and done. Desperation attempts. Oh my God, I can go on and on, but I'm going to wait. So we're going to make that be the main event. So that match I'll keep the same, and there's probably a couple others, but this one is the best of the best. So this is definitely, I hate to say it, but I think it's a one-match show for most folks. If you were to ask them what they remember about SummerSlam '94, because certainly Undertaker versus Undertaker left a lot to be desired. Let's get into the card here, shall we? So I'd kick off the event with the tag team bout, very basic. The Smoking Guns taking on the tag team, the newly formed stable of the $1 Million Corporation, managed by Ted DiBiase. We have Bam Bam Bigelow and IRS. So Billy and Bart have to contend with a new sort of makeshift team. And having watched the Bam Bam IRS match, they took on the Head Shrinkers, whom they were supposed to challenge for the tag belts, but Head Shrinkers lost those belts at a house show the previous night to Diesel and Shawn in Indianapolis. So it ended up just being a regular tag team match for what it's worth. Bam Bam and IRS did not click as a team. It was a dud match when I watched it, and even with another team like the Smoking Guns, Billy and Bart will have to pull out all the stops just to keep this one going. But I would still give Bam Bam and IRS the Duke here because they are forming a new stable. And when you're doing that, you want to make sure they're protected and they look strong. They'll look weak if they're just defeated, especially on a pay-per-view, let alone a Raw match. But, whatever combination you have, because the $1 Million Corporation, we'll be talking a little bit about them later on too, actually throughout this video. Ted DiBiase obviously couldn't wrestle anymore due to neck issues or whatever, so a year earlier at SummerSlam, that was his swan song from the physical aspect of pro wrestling. Come a year later, he's ready to form a stable, because he can at least still carry himself on the mic and talk and manage whatever. So he recruits a homeless Nikolai Volkov, who he took every chance not only just to employ, but to degrade in the process. And in so doing, he gave him a pair of trunks with a cent sign, which juxtaposed the dollar sign that DiBiase used to wear on his trunks in his heyday. And then he had a t-shirt, which was, just to add insult to injury, property of the $1 Million Man. So he found Nikolai Volkov on the street in the spring of '94 and just dragged him off and dusted him off. And during that son of a bitch silence, now I know I'm going to quote The Rock. No, he just brought him out to the ring and said, you look like you look terrible, so let me give you, you look like nothing, so I'm going to make you something. But then he just decided to degrade him along the way. So, he had him, and then he also bought the contract of Bam Bam Bigelow from Luna Vachon. I guess there was some tension between Bam Bam and Luna, which led to Bigelow joining the corporation. And IRS was naturally there because Money Inc. was just a tag team a year prior to this. So yeah, Bam Bam and IRS win. It'll be a basic match, and that's all she wrote. Next match would be a match that actually took place on the dark match, which would have been the dark match that night in real time. Adam Bomb versus Quang, and both men were under the employ of Harvey Whippleman. Harvey was a mastermind manager and a great manipulator and an amazing talker on the mic too. So both it seemed like Quang was getting more attention from Harvey than was his other client, Adam Bomb. Now Adam Bomb, the gimmick, if you recall, was created because of the 3 Mile Island incident, I believe that took place in like 1987. Correct me if I'm wrong on the year. It was a nuclear explosion. He's supposed to have been a survivor and somebody who arose like a phoenix from the ashes, and was this nuclear human being created out of this devastation, so to speak. And so yeah, Adam Bomb with that whole gimmick. I guess it was cool, but you don't want to create it out of a nuclear disaster of all things. So he actually got over with the fans. He was getting cheered more and more. And Quang, he was just really, what's the best way I could describe Quang at this point in time in his career? He was just treading water, basically. And Harvey Whippleman was a great mouthpiece for both men. Brian Clark got slightly better on the mic on his own. But Quang was Savio Vega. And Savio Vega hadn't, gone out on his own yet and hadn't had that incident, where he revealed himself to be a good friend of Razor Ramon from back in the day, supposedly. Kayfabe. So Quang, so I would have Adam Bomb go over in this one, just because they've been feuding, and I didn't actually pay much attention if this feud ever did, and it's a year before I started watching. It would seem like Quang would be getting the upper hand, and it would make sense for Adam Bomb to go over, as revenge, and basic win for a babyface, get the upper hand in the end, and get the Duke, and that's it. All right, this next match will actually have some more levity to it. Well, not levity. This match will have a lot more at stake as far as, not just a simple throwaway match, as I'm best trying to describe it. This is the Women's Championship, and they were just rebuilding the division at this time. We know it wasn't a great deal of success in the 90s, but certainly notwithstanding, we have the Women's Champion, Alundra Blaze, who won a tournament in December of 93 to be crowned the new champion, defending against Luna Vachon. And I think I previously talked about this match as I had it in Rewriting WrestleMania 10. Go back and watch that video. It was several months ago that I recorded it. So, yeah, I'm thinking in this one, I would definitely have Luna go over, because I had Alundra go over the last time, and, she's going to be the inaugural champion as the belt's being restored. But Luna, eventually she's going to have to lose to the heel and then create another storyline. I know in real time she took on Bull Nakano, but Nakano can get her shot somewhere further down the line. I'll have to rush her into the picture just yet. Luna is done managing Bam Bam Bigelow. She's out on her own, and that's a belt that's eluded her basically her whole entire career, up until she died, basically, even though she hadn't been wrestling the last few years, from what I heard, before her death. So Luna, definitely some underhanded tactics, a lot of nail pulling, nail scratching, hair pulling, but then, you got some technical, technical moves in there, like suplexes and, what else? Clotheslines and maybe some drop kicks. I could see her doing that. Any, things of that nature. So, yeah, then eventually she'd get the win, but I would have it be like a dirty win where she puts her feet on the ropes or something underhanded, and that way she gets the Duke. Bull Nakano could be like an enforcer. Somehow we'd work Bull into the story, and eventually she'll be the one challenging, because Alundra will win it back, and then she'll have that opponent. But, I'd have more babyface challengers also, because when you had just Alundra and she's challenging everyone, she only get the same amount of matches out of the same girls so many times. Same could be said for the guys if you only had, 3 or 4 guys on the entire roster to work with. So, gotta mix it up a little bit. All right, next match. This one I would have kept the same. It was perfect just as is. For the Intercontinental Championship, we have Diesel defending against the bad guy, Razor Ramon. Razor had a special guest in his corner. Tired of having Shawn Michaels constantly interfering in his matches on Diesel's behalf, he decided to enlist the help of a local hero. Chicago Bears linebacker, or running back, I believe, Sweetness Walter Payton, the late great Walter Payton. I just found out I'm not an NFL fan, so I'm just learning about these players individually. He died in like November '99. He was very young. Walter Payton, though, was, being that he's a Chicago Bear, it's perfect, and they're in Chicago. So he would definitely provide opposition as a corner man to Razor and against Shawn and Diesel, respectively. The match, I wouldn't really change anything, even the outcome. Have Razor win and Shawn. That was a classic ending, by the way, where Shawn tried to nail the sweet chin music, or super kick, rather, because he didn't tune up the band. He nailed the super kick, but it was to the wrong guy. Razor's in front. He ducks. Diesel's standing because he's supposed to be holding Razor, and Sean, knocks him in the jaw. Oh, man. That set the tide for what was to come as far as the breakup of the two dudes with attitude. This would be... I wouldn't have them here actually walk in with Tag Team Gold, because they still had Tag Team Gold. They just won it the previous night from the Head Shrinkers at a house show. But if I was to rewrite this, I'd have a tag title match on this card with the Head Shrinkers, which we'll get to in a little bit. Excuse me. But, eventually they'll win it, but I'd wait for another point in time to do so. And that'll keep them together for a little while longer until Survivor Series, and then we'll see what happens. All right, so this match we didn't have a tag team title match because of the events of Sean and Diesel winning it the night before. So the Head Shrinkers, still with Samu and Fatu, defending against the Heavenly Bodies, the Doctor of Desire, Tom Pritchard, and the Gigolo, Jimmy Del Rey. So besides the fact that they wanted to get the tag belts on Diesel and Shawn Michaels, it seemed like, on a whim, Samu was actually the real-life son of Afa, who was the Head Shrinkers manager then. Samu was thinking about leaving the company. He needed to recover from some injuries, and the kayfabe explanation was that he ate some type of bad raw fish, which, is a bullshit explanation for anybody watching it. I remember rewatching it like, what? They're going to try to throw that one by us? No way. So they need to get the belts off the Head Shrinkers as Samu was about to depart the company, leaving Fatu without a partner. Enter the Barbarian, only this time he's renamed Sione. Sione and Fatu tried to revive what they called the new Head Shrinkers, but was met with very limited, or barely any success at all. And Sione was the Barbarian. He's of Tongan descent. He's not actually Samoan, like the Anawai clan and Maiavias and Johnsons. So so anyways, that's what they ended up doing with the Head Shrinkers. But here I'd have the Head Shrinkers retain the belts, because the Heavenly Bodies, I don't think, they were still seldom seen in WWF around this time, because they were the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Champions, and that promotion folded in the fall of '94. So you'll see more of the Heavenly Bodies. I think that's why they came back to TV. There was no developmental, really, unless you count USWA. So, this would actually be a good clash of styles here. The fit finesse, the finesse of the Heavenly Bodies taking on the brute power and force of the Head Shrinkers, and great mesh of styles. Have this one at least go 12, 13 minutes. I could see it working out great. And then the Head Shrinkers would win with their, finisher, where Samu stands against the ropes in the corner, and Fatu jumps off his shoulders or whatever, and that's that. All right, now we're at our 6th match here. So I did say there were going to be 10 matches. Now, not all these matches have to be very long. I want to leave enough time, over 30 minutes, for the main event, which will be the steel cage match, Brett and Owen. So, you just have to keep track of time. But as a producer, that's something they'd have to be mindful about. Now, this match, I don't see why it didn't happen, because both men, I think, were perfectly fine to wrestle, maybe except for one. This match is the 1-2-3 Kid versus Shawn Michaels. So, 1-2-3 Kid was nowhere to be seen on SummerSlam 94. I don't know if he had an injury or anything. Actually, I didn't look it up. But Shawn Michaels, that was an interesting year for him. Pardon me. Coming off the heels of WrestleMania 10 and that epic ladder match, which I'll talk ad nauseum about if you let me. I guess he sustained a lot of injuries, and he was dealing with maybe some drug addictions, or actually, more or less, the AI was kind of wonky on this one, so I had to look at other old wrestling websites. I think he was dealing with some family issues, too. There might have been, I don't know if it was, any girlfriends at the time or whatever, love-hate relationships, but I think that took him off TV a lot, and he was also injuries, too, that notwithstanding. So he didn't do a whole lot physically. Like, you didn't see him, competing on Raw or Superstars every week. But they did create a talk show to keep him relevant, which was the Heartbreak Hotel. And that's how it started. What he can't do physically, we'll have him do on the mic. Same could be said for, like I was just talking about with Ted DiBiase earlier, the $1 Million Corporation. So in this match, I'd have Shawn get the Duke here. He's not going to have Diesel in his corner because they're in the midst of an argument over the outcome of the Intercontinental title match. And yeah, Kid, he'd throw his best. And this would be a decent match, but I'm not going to say it's one of their best. It would get better time if placed on a Monday Night Raw. On this pay-per-view, and it's, already pretty stacked, I'd say probably no more than 10 minutes for these guys, and Shawn would get a quick win. And then, he'd just strut his way on out of here. Shawn Michaels has left the building. Case closed. All right, what's next? Okay, so this is the match I really wanted to talk about. I keep the competitors the same, but not the outcome. Lex Luger versus Tatanka, and this was so weird for its time. Well, maybe not completely unusual if we saw the Mega Powers explode in the 80s. Lex Luger and Tatanka were both beloved baby faces on the roster. Especially the kids got behind them in the new generation. Tatanka, we can't say Native American anymore, it's not politically correct, so they'd have to call him indigenous, but, he's supposed to be of, a tribe of some sort, Tatanka was. Lex Luger, playing Made in the USA as an all-American patriot type character, so they got along well because they had common enemies, and like Yokozuna, the Quebecers, and Ludwig Borga, people like that. So, Tatanka, it seemed like he was spending the summer interrogating Lex Luger as to whether or not he would sell out to the $1 Million Man. It seems like if the $1 Million Corporation is going to really take off, they need a big name to sort of be like the star of the group. Andre the Giant and the Heenan family, Hollywood Hogan leading the NWO, Shawn Michaels leading D-Generation X, or Triple H later on down the line. You need a marquee name. So, people might disagree with this, but I don't care. As you know, it's all opinion, it's all subjective. I would have Lex Luger go over in this match. I love that they did Superstar Line fan poll voting, but they did it over the phone. Of course, this is before texting and cell phones in 1994. So you had to call the hotline. It was probably $1.49. It was always $1.49 the first minute and 99 cents each additional minute. So kids, please have mom and dad's permission before calling. And I hope that they actually did. And you got to, vote. You press 1 for yes, you think Luger's going to sell out, 2 for no, you don't think Luger's going to sell out. So yeah, I would have Luger go over because let's face it, when Tatanka won in real life, what did that actually do for his career? Nothing. He turned heel. What a shock. And it didn't really propel him to the next level. He didn't win the Intercontinental title, so he wasn't like a threat to the mid-card division of any sort. DiBiase cut most of his promos. DiBiase had to be the talker. A lot of those guys just couldn't cut it on the mic. That was, I think a big part of why that group didn't succeed, the $1 Million Corporation. As they were adding members, these members just didn't help the group rise in stock. Not enough reasons to care. So Tatanka really didn't help. He didn't do any favors in that respect. He was just a turncoat, the Benedict Arnold, as they called him. He started wearing all black as opposed to, stuff that were hand-me-downs from his grandfathers. And he was accepting bribes all the time, as did the other members. But if you turn Luger heel, and a year ago, Luger was beloved. At this point in time, the gimmick of Made in the USA was really dead in the water. From SummerSlam 93, which I've already talked about that ad nauseum, my WrestleMania 10 rewrite. WrestleMania 10 didn't help matters much, and I wouldn't have had him in the world title picture, but I'd still have him be a babyface. But up until this point, there's all the evidence in the world. The proof is in the pudding. When you saw that footage, writing was on the wall. When you saw Luger walking into the dressing room of a $1 Million Corporation and, constantly winning matches because of Ted DiBiase and other members trying to help him in so doing. So, how would I orchestrate the ending of this match? So, DiBiase's going to walk out. I could see Tatanka trying to go for end of the trail, just like a Death Valley driver. Luger's going to get up, and then he's going to start yelling. Tatanka's going to start yelling at DiBiase on the outside. Luger all of a sudden is going to go for the Rebel Rack. That's what he called the torture rack in WWF. And, Tatanka will submit. But then Luger's going to accept the victory, but then DiBiase's going to walk in. And eventually a handshake's going to happen. What? Or something shocking to that effect. And then he's going to continue his beat down. That's the way it should have gone. Then Luger, whatever the next episode on Raw, because this was on a Monday, so I have to wait a whole week for Raw, would come out and he'd be, dressed in black or in gold, and, he'd admit to being a sellout. And the way I envisioned this in my head leading up to now, he totally could have been like the Hollywood Hogan of his own NWO stable. And mind you, this is 2 years before NWO ever existed. Oh my God, do you see how this could work on so many different levels? It could have elevated Lex as a dominant heel main event figure. He could have been feuding with guys like Bret Hart, Razor Ramon, The Undertaker, other top baby faces, I guess, that I can't seem to name right now. But damn, that would have been so great. Talk about missed opportunities. This is one of them. See, Luger was just floundering, and nobody cared. When he changed his music from, one more thing I'll say before we go on to the next match. One more thing I'll say about Luger. He changed his music from coming down to John Philip Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever, which always got a great crowd reaction if they're trying to push a very pro-Americana wrestler. Another real American, so to speak. But then he comes out with this Made in the USA Jim Johnston theme, which is not bad because it's Jim Johnston. He always does a great job, but it just wasn't befitting for Luger. It was just a simple bass line. Dun, 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 dun. Crowd wasn't reacting at all, and they had to pipe in these chants of USA, USA. So it did not feel organic, but this would have changed everything because he was a perfect heel in WCW, which I believe was in the late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, like the late 90s, early 2000s, he did some great stuff as a heel, and he was a big top baby face, but better booked. But man, just to think the trajectory, the course of his career could have changed tenfold. Oh man. And he would have been protected with DiBiase as a talker, because Luger wasn't the greatest talker, but he could have done something, and damn. It's too bad this never took off. So Luger would get the Duke. All right, now this next match is a cool down from all that. This one I would keep the same, but it was definitely not a great match. I think I gave it like 1 1/4. It was entertaining for a little while, but pretty bland otherwise. I'm talking about Mabel from Men on a Mission taking on Double J Jeff Jarrett. I feel especially bad that Jeff Jarrett had to compete in this match. Mabel's not a great worker. For a big guy, he's impressive looking, but that's about where all the positive things I'm going to say about him end. In the ring, he's pretty atrocious. He can knock people down okay, but he was rough and dangerous, or so a lot of people reported, so they didn't want to push a guy who was not safe to work with physically. And Vince McMahon learned that the hard way at SummerSlam 95, what he did to Diesel a year later, almost breaking his lower back. But Kevin Nash came to Nelson Frazier's rescue. But again, I'm getting off the point. So Mabel was kind of going solo here. Mo from Men on a Mission was injured throughout the spring and summer of 94, so it gave Mabel a chance to branch out for a singles run briefly. Jeff Jarrett was really hitting his stride, the country music gimmick. This is basically country versus rap, which is the better music genre. So, Jarrett was just playing the cowardly heel, running away from the big guy, trying to tire him out, use the speed against Mabel, because Mabel's not very quick. Oscar was there on the outside because he wrapped Mabel on the way to the ring, and basically it was just a roll-up victory, an inside cradle for Jarrett after some mistimed maneuvers on the part of Mabel. That's all I got to say about it, so we'll leave it be. All right, now we're getting to our penultimate match. I guess you could say co-main events, but I hate to say it because this match does not deserve to even be called a main event. It was a great selling point. It was great for the poster, great attraction, if you will, on the marquee. I'm talking about The Undertaker versus The Undertaker. How is that possible? It's 2 Undertakers. Well, there's a lot to be. I have a lot of explaining to do. So this match actually closed out SummerSlam, and coming off the hot angle of the Hart brothers and that match, ooh, man, the heat and intensity coming off that, this just cooled it down too much, and the crowd was dead. No pun intended, we're talking about 2 Undertakers. So we have Mark Calloway taking on his good friend Brian Lee, whom you might remember better as Chains of the DOA. Chains wouldn't come around for another 3 years, but Brian Lee, yeah, he and Undertaker started wrestling together down in Texas, I believe, and got him some tryouts in WWF, but didn't work until he became Chains later on, the DOA. So, Mark Calloway had taken time off for a back injury that just needed fixing. After the 1994 Royal Rumble, he loses that casket match to Yokozuna, and they have that stupid awakening, what do they call it? The resurrection of The Undertaker. Even for 94, it was beyond bad. Cheesy, but worse. And he took some time off. And meanwhile, Ted DiBiase, as he's continuing to recruit members of this $1 million corporation, which if he'd had Luger, he'd hit the jackpot. But he tried with The Undertaker. And nobody was buying into the fact that this popular fan favorite is all of a sudden going to be selling out, to a multimillionaire. So this Brian Lee, the Underfaker, if you want to call him that, started, appearing on, Wrestling Challenge and Superstars. He had matches against amateurs, typical fanfare. And eventually people claimed to have seen The Undertaker, but really they were looking at The Underfaker. So in this match, I would definitely keep Mark Calloway as the winner, but I'd make it a casket match. Make it a little more interesting, because it didn't make sense. They brought out a casket, the Druids did, after DiBiase fled ringside, wanting nothing more to do with this Undertaker bullshit. Druids came out and put Brian Lee in the casket, but it would have made sense to make this an actual casket match. And then he's gone, and then the whole night we had George Kennedy and Leslie Nielsen from the Naked Gun movie series on the prowl, figuring out the mystery. It ended up being they saw a briefcase that was quite literally closed. Get it? Case closed. Let's go get some lunch. Yeah, that's all. I'm going to end on that note. All right, now to the grand finale. The creme de la creme. One of the greatest matches, if not limited to steel cage matches of all time, for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Bret the Hitman Hart defending against his younger brother, Owen Hart. The King of Hearts, Owen Hart. He just won the 94 King of the Ring. Great choice to have Owen win, by the way. Steel cage match keeps all the family out except for Bret and Owen. And all the family flew from Calgary to come. As we know, this started the 1993 Survivor Series when Owen was the only member of the Hart family eliminated on his team that night against Shawn Michaels and his Knights. Little feud over the holidays, but they patched things up. 1994 Royal Rumble, they lose their tag title match to the Quebecers. They get disqualified or something. Owen snaps. That solidifies the heel turn. WrestleMania 10 and the best opening match probably I've ever seen. There's a few contenders out there, but that's probably top of the line, which I gave 5 stars to, but Meltzer only 4 3/4. Then Bret wins the gold in the main event later that night, WrestleMania 10. So that's how the gold is tied into it. And Owen obviously wants to challenge. He just won King of the Ring, so he's riding high on cloud 9. And to prove he's the best of the Hart family. And while they're showing a video package, and while that's happening, they're building the blue steel cage. I missed that blue steel cage. They would take the time to build it, so you'd have to show a video package to distract the audience, I guess. The audience is watching it, but the fans at home, you have to distract them somehow. So British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith was in attendance. They actually bought tickets, the family did, and it's like, you're a former talent. You can be backstage. I guess he hadn't been hired back yet, but he was slowly working his way back into the fold. A smooth transition for one Davey Boy Smith. Hadn't been seen in 2 years at that point in time because of the little steroid trial. So the steroid trial had ended. We could bring you back now. Jim Neidhart, who you saw at King of the Ring, he was in Bret Hart's corner in his title match against Diesel. He helped him win, or no, he got him disqualified actually, and then helped Owen win King of the Ring against Razor in the finals. So Jim Neidhart, even though he's actually rehired as a full-time talent right then and there, is still sitting in the audience with his brother-in-law, Davey Boy. Brother-in-law is via marriage. He just bought tickets. And he's already contracted as a superstar. So that didn't make sense to me, because how are you going to explain that from a kayfabe standpoint? It's like, I was at Saturday Night's Main Event this weekend, just a quick side note with my brother. Like, Trick Williams had a match on the pre-show, and yet it's like he's sitting front row like he had to buy a ticket. He's a talent, for crying out loud. Why? Why would you put him out there just to market him as such, and he could be watching this backstage or in a suite somewhere? Anyways, getting back to this. So the match happens. Owen was very desperate right from the get-go. I loved how his every attempt to thwart Bret exiting the cage was just, the timing was impeccable, the way he would just launch at him to get his brother from getting out that door, escaping, and and then Bret was obviously gonna fight fair and use as many submission holds as possible. I feel like this match went a good 45 minutes, but I think it clocked in at 35 something. Damn, it felt longer than it actually was, but this is for good reason. A match like this, and it had been building already for 9 months, almost a whole year. What better culmination? And this should have gone on last. The crowd was reacting to everything. I love the way that Bret and Owen would protect each other on the spots. Deep down, there's that brotherly love. So when he's going for a suplex, or, he's going for a side suplex, one brother is protecting the other. And Bret talked about it in his DVD. that was released in 2005 for WWE Home Video. When I was superplexing Owen from the top of the cage, I felt like I was bringing him down from the heavens or something like that, to that effect. Man, great stuff. And finally, after a bunch of sharpshooters and submission holds and a lot of cat and mouse back and forth action, Brett finally is able to escape the cage and didn't have to tie up Owen in any ropes to do so. And Owen was just a few inches behind him, wanted to grab his ankles, but he couldn't do it. A little ankle biter there. Brett gets out. The family celebrates. A Jim Neidhart from behind. Oh, he attacks Brett. Sorry. A post-match beatdown. Davey Boy gets involved on Brett's behalf. The rest, like Bruce and Keith, all climbing into the ring. Smith, I think, was there. What other Hearts? Ross, I think. Dean, I think, already passed by this point. Oh my God, the Hart men, not Ellie, Diana, Georgia, the Hart women. Stu and Helen are watching this, and man, anytime Stu and Helen got involved, it's a high stakes match for Brett. You knew it was like golden right there. And Brett was, 1994 was the year of the Hitman, and gosh, there was just something intangible about that time period looking back. And I hadn't even started watching yet, but being a fan and watching it makes you see how far wrestling has fallen as far as the great storylines go and organic chemistry is concerned. And granted, these two were brothers, so they knew each other very well in the ring, needless to say, training in their dad's dungeon. There's something about the aesthetic. You watch today's WWE and it just doesn't compare. And not to say that things are a lot more faker, for lack of a better term, than what they used to be, but something just doesn't add up. And watching something from 1994, it's a world of difference, though that might not have been a marquee year for the company. There's a lot of fans, even they're older than me, and was what we're watching, this time period, and they'll look back on it fondly. It doesn't have to be the greatest time period financially, like Golden Era, Attitude Era. But certainly, that would be an ideal card for SummerSlam 94 if I were to rewrite it. And this has been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye.